So why is outfitting so important in a kayak? The simplest piece is that we should be in control of the kayak, not the kayak in control of us. We want to be connected to it in such a way that when we move our bodies, the kayak responds the way we want it to respond. To be able to surf, to be able to carve turns even in flat water, we have to have control of the kayak. In rough water paddling, to keep the kayak where we want it to be and to not just get away from us, we need to be in control. The problem with most modern sea kayaks is that when they're made to fit a range of paddlers, and it's predominantly based on paddler weight. So the two kayaks I have next to me are very different, and aside from the length difference, I just want to look at what the typical cockpits are. The kayak to my right here is a little 14-foot playboat. It has a 23-inch beam, relatively low deck height at 6.6 inches, or 6 3/4 inches. The kayak to my left is a much larger volume expedition kayak, and it's got a deck height closer to 12.5 inches, but its beam is also only 22 inches, so narrower beam than on the one to my right, slightly longer cockpit. The big difference is really that volume, right? Because both of these kayaks will fit a paddler between about 100 pounds and 220 pounds to the one on my right, and about 130 pounds to 200 pounds for the one on my left. At 155 pounds, I fit right in the middle of the weight category for the kayak to my right, and a little more to the bottom, but well within the range of the weight category on the one on my left. And how I fit in these kayaks is very different, even from the factory. And again, part of it goes to the volume. There is so much space on this kayak up here that isn't here, and really a lot of that space on the side here. That means when I sit in this kayak with my smaller legs, I don't fill out the gap between where the thigh hooks would be and the outside of the kayak, and that leaves a large void in the space. And that means as my legs move left to right, they're not touching the kayak and not leaving me in control of the kayak. So as you can see on this much larger volume kayak, there's these small little thigh braces right here up at the top of the deck that you'll find on a lot of better plastic kayaks. Typically you're not going to see these on most composite kayaks. It's just a large flat surface here. And you can see on the inside walls there's really no padding, so there's a huge amount of volume. And ideally in a kayak I should be sitting so that my thigh is up in these thigh hooks with my kneecap just forward of them, so I'm not putting pressure on my knee, and then the outside of my thigh would be against this side wall. So in a kayak this big, for a paddler my size, again 155 pounds, and sitting in a kayak that's rated for 130 to 200 pounds, which should be well within my weight capacity, and I should fit quite well in this kayak, I don't. And that's because my legs, even when they sit up in this thigh hook up in here, do not come anywhere near contact with the outside of this hull. And that means I don't have direct connection here, and that means a loss of control and an inability to maneuver the kayak, and I'm forced to rely heavily on my paddle. So you can see sitting in this kayak now, my kneecap is right in front of the thigh hook, and the wraps start to get around my thigh right here where it should be. This is a good spot with my balls of my feet or my toes on the foot braces and pressing. Where the challenge comes in now is really going to be the gap on the other side of my leg. And let's see if I can get this to where you can see this gap difference. That if I move the camera here, you can see how much space is between the outside of my thigh and the wall of the kayak. All of this space means as my leg moves to the right, I'm not actually doing anything to the kayak. I'm not giving the kayak any sort of direction or control. The only point of contact I have right now with this kayak control is right here on the top of my thigh, which means all of this space on the outside here, this void, means this kayak can shift side to side with my legs, and the only way for me to control is to really bring my legs up really hard and lock onto it, or I have to bring my legs up even closer and wedge my knees. So now I have contact with the outside of the kayak by keeping my legs up in this really tight, bent, frog-like position. to control the kayak means I can't use my legs for anything else. I can't use my legs to actually turn the kayak now. I can't use my legs to roll the kayak because they're already serving the purpose of holding the kayak steady. By comparison now, I've got this really aggressive thigh hook right here on this custom foam that I used, and what that does is gives me good connection between the top of my thigh and the bottom of the kayak without having my leg too extended or brought in too far up. That allows me to keep my body in a more relaxed, natural position. The other thing is you can go to the outside of this kayak, and one thing you'll notice now is that there's this big foam block right here. And my leg is actually resting right on that foam block. That means my leg is actually touching the outside of this kayak. So not only do I have control of the kayak here, underneath, I have control of the kayak all against that outside wall. And that means whether I bring my leg up, or turn my leg, or push my leg out when I rotate my body, I am controlling the kayak. My legs are not pulled all the way up nice and tight. That means my legs can stay relaxed and useful for being able to turn and control the kayak, since legs can't multitask. And that gives me, like I said, not only more control of the kayak and being more stable, but also being able to control the kayak to make it go where I want to go. Stop recording. What we've done on the inside of the hull here is create this entire shape where my leg actually fits right in here. And that allows me to have this constant wraparound control over the kayak. That without this block, there's this big lost space and loss of control like I mentioned in the other kayak. And again, this is a wide kayak, and even on this low deck, you can see how thick this piece is in between, right, in the center of this hook. I still needed to have that much more space to keep my legs in a good position for paddling without having so much tension on them or having my legs so pulled up and tight in that frog position, because the more the frog position we're in, the less we can actually physically rotate our upper bodies. So you can see here, there's just stock padding. This is what comes from most manufacturers. They just put this little piece of foam so it's softer, but this doesn't give us much control unless our legs are right against this. And then the problem without adding extra foam in here now is that it's not the side of my thigh that's going to press against this, it's my kneecap, especially since the kayak starts to curve in. And if my kneecap is what's pressing against this the whole time, it's going to get sore and I'm not going to be able to hold that pressure. The other side of it, just from a comparison, this is the exact same cockpit dimensions as that other white kayak. It is 20 inches on the beam instead of 23, but the deck height's taller. So in this kayak, even though my legs are in closer and I have better contact with the outside, I actually have less contact with the top of the deck. So in order to get more contact with the top of the deck, I have to bring my legs up and bend them into this tighter shape. And because they're bent in that tighter shape, it's less comfortable over time, more fatigue. We can't use our legs when we're trying to pull up to maintain control for forward strokes, either to push off and drive our legs if we're doing a Euroblade stroke, and it doesn't allow me to do as easily push my legs left and right or bring them around when we're rolling. And part of that is because we need our legs to hold us in the kayak, that we can't actually use our legs to perform control tasks. So this kayak as well should get outfitted here and here to add additional padding to create that same lock where I'm connected. The problem with most modern sea kayaks is that they're meant for a range of paddlers and predominantly based on paddler weight, not just dimension size. That means we don't get from a factory a kayak that fits us the way it should. If you look at traditional Greenland kayaks, they are built to a paddler. They fit the paddler specifically. They become almost an extension of the paddler, allowing them to control the kayak, move the kayak as they move, and yet have enough room within that kayak that they aren't being moved by the kayak. There's this fine line between how well you fit as opposed to being too snug to have control but not be controlled. With a modern kayak, the only way we're going to get that connection is to get a kayak that fits us reasonably well, and then add additional padding to give that control. Without that additional padding, we're simply going to be far too loose in most kayaks. That means we're going to have a harder time feeling stable, and we're going to have a very difficult time controlling that kayak rolling, and especially in rough water and trying to move through current or wind, or to perform a rescue where we really have to dictate how the kayak moves in order to get where we're going, as opposed to being pushed around by conditions. So this outfitting, this connection is vital, and it really means taking the time to make your kayak fit you properly. And in the worst case, if the kayak you're in is just way too big, while there's some things we can do to help, it's also a good indication of looking for a kayak that is a better fit for you. So that kayak with proper outfitting to give you the control and the comfort is everything, and it's going to make you a better paddler, and you can have a more enjoyable time when you're paddling.